All right, good evening, everyone. It's 5:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone back. I see a lot of familiar faces from a couple weeks ago. Thank you for joining. I hope everyone's having a great Earth Day. This is a very timely discussion tonight. For those of you who don't know, my name is Melanie Sims. I'm a principal planner with the town. Joining me tonight is Renee O'Vera, who's a senior planner with the town. And both of us are here to help support you all through the discussion this evening. Before we get started, though, I do see a couple new faces. So if you weren't able to join us on April 8th, if you'd please raise your virtual hand so you can introduce yourself to the group. Maybe start with Lyle. I saw you unmuted.
Yes, so Lyle Vandermeid. Not sure what all I'm supposed to say to introduce myself. I'm 57, 7 years, almost 8 years in Oro Valley, retired and exciting to join.
Great, thank you for joining us, Lyle. How about Naranjan?
Hey, Melanie. Hello, everyone. I apologize. Let me lower my hand. Apologize that I'm remote. I'm actually at a youth soccer game. So I've been in Oro Valley far too long. I was here far too long before I got involved, but got involved when things hit our backyard. Isn't that what happens for most of the time? So I know Melanie and Renee from my participation in the Water Utility Commission, and I've joined a couple of Oro Valley Path Forward sessions. And thank you. I'll just say that I've been here 27 years and involved for maybe 5. So thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else on the call? I know a couple people joined as I was speaking who weren't able to make it on April 8th, and this is your first meeting. If you'd raise your virtual hand, or you're also welcome to unmute yourself. Okay, and let's see. Sandra?
Hello, I'm retired. I've moved to Oro Valley about 6 years ago, but I've lived in Arizona for about 40 some years. We first moved here to Tucson in 1978. So we had to leave as we were transferred out of Arizona for 4 years, and we couldn't wait to get back. So nice to meet you all.
Great. Glad you're able to, glad you made it back.
Yes.
Okay, and then I saw James is on the call, but he had to walk out, so maybe we'll have him introduce himself in a moment. So I just have a brief presentation, then we'll get right into the discussion. I do want to let folks know that the focus of our discussion tonight is on the draft goals, policies, and actions. They were emailed out to the group, but they're also linked in the chat, so you're welcome to bring them up on your own device to follow along tonight, as we'll be definitely moving around the whiteboard a whole bunch this evening. Oh, and here he comes. And then James, did you want to introduce yourself to the group if you want to unmute?
Oh, hi, James Stacy. I've been traveling a lot, so I missed the last couple of meetings. Been involved with this wonderful group for, I guess, probably a year and a half. Whenever it started, I was one of the first ambassadors. So great being here. We've been here for 4 years from Escape, Southern California. Fantastic place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Just give me one moment while I share some slides. All right, so again, thank you all for joining tonight. The last time we met was on April 8th, and you all participated in a great discussion that gave us a lot of additional guidance to help craft draft goals, policies, and actions. The guidance you gave the last meeting, our legal requirements, as well as what we heard over the past year from residents is what was used to craft those. And our focus tonight is to really walk through the drafts to make sure they reflect what we heard over the past year, but also what you discussed a couple weeks ago. Now, I do want to emphasize that the word draft, because this really is our first attempt to capture everything. These drafts will continue to be refined and will be sent back out to your group for wordsmithing and further review. Tonight's focus, though, is really just to make sure they reflect what was heard and capture everything. We're going to be making sure that they address what we heard, but also that nothing is missing. Additionally, our aim for this meeting is to achieve consensus on these first drafts. So some of you may recall, if you attended the orientation back in January, that the group helped define what the word consensus means. And some of those definitions are shown on the screen. But ultimately, it's something that you can accept. You may not agree with everything, but it is what is best for the community. Please keep this in mind as we proceed through the discussion tonight. I also just want to give a quick reminder of what goals, policies, and actions are. The goals are really the bigger picture and aim to answer what are we striving for. It's the desired results, whereas the policy is the bridge between the goals and actions. It's the how do we get there. And then the action is the specific details or the tasks for the town to take to achieve those goals. Now, the charge for a 10-year plan is to make sure that the goals, policies, and actions are prescriptive enough to meet resident intentions and priorities, but broad enough to stay relevant over a 10-year time frame. So also keep that in mind as we go through these tonight. Again, our charge is to create a plan that honors what residents voiced over the past year. The guiding principle that's shown on the screen aims to capture what was heard through a statistically projectable survey, as well as at events and online over the past year. It provided the guidance for our discussion a couple weeks ago and also this evening. And at the end of the meeting, I will be checking in with you as a group to make sure that it gets it right in terms of capturing resident priorities for environment and views. Similarly, there is a guiding principle about climate and sustainability. This also aims to capture what was heard over the past year, and I'll be checking in with you at the end of this meeting to also make sure that it still accurately reflects what was heard and also what you've discussed as a group. And lastly, before we start our discussions, I just want to remind folks of the ground rules everyone accepted. As you probably already know, we have a lot to go through this evening, as we did similar to what we went through a couple weeks ago. I just ask that everyone try to stay focused on the area that we are discussing so we can be efficient and productive. And also just to make sure everyone is respectful of everyone's time as we aim for consensus. We are going to use the virtual whiteboard again, so if this is your first meeting, it is through Zoom. The most important thing to know is that you can navigate the whiteboard yourself and it won't affect anybody else's views. There is a navigation menu in the lower right-hand corner where you can zoom in, zoom out, or use the hand icon to pan around. Again, I did post the goals, policies, and actions in the chat, so if you're more comfortable following along on your own device with the attachment, please do that as well. Okay, and with that, I am going to share the whiteboard. Just one moment. All right, so as you can see on the whiteboard, I know you can't read it just yet, but we have about 7 different areas and 2 guiding principles to go through this evening. I will be keeping time for the meeting, but please also keep that in mind. We do prefer to hear everyone's voice and see your faces. So if you're able to have your video on, raise your virtual hand and unmute yourself, that's great. However, I also understand if your videos need to be off or if you would prefer to use the chat. Either way is fine. The most important part of this discussion is that we hear your voice. So for tonight, we're going to start off with talking about environment and open space, and that includes native plants, also looking at the compatibility. We're then going to move into our discussions about views and climate, as well as energy efficiency. So I'm going to scroll us over to the yellow column. So if you're following along on your own document, this will be the first 2 pages. Should also be yellow. So this, what we heard last time, we talked about open space conservation areas as well as environmental resources. You all gave a lot of comments about making sure that there's wildlife connectivity, natural habitats are protected, including native plants, that we need to maintain and increase open space, and then also be cognizant of how of washes, stormwater, and aquifers. So moving us down to our first set of goals, policies, and actions. When it comes to wildlife connectivity, you guys discussed making sure the surrounding area is considered. There needs to be possibly more wildlife crossings, as well as, and those part of wildlife crossings are the washes, and then also making sure that areas near open space may need to be improved to facilitate more wildlife movement. As part of wildlife connectivity is also the natural habitats, and that includes native plants. So our focus tonight is on the columns that are highlighted in dark yellow. So that's the working goal, policies, and actions. So we're going to go through all of these. So I'd like to start off though with number 1. So we're on AB1, AB2, and C1 in the actions. That follows A, B, and C of the policies and goal 1. So give everyone a moment to read through these, and then we'd like to hear if you have any questions for clarification, if you think anything is missing or needs to be added or clarified. And you can raise your virtual hand when you're ready to comment. Rosa.
So, I have a couple of suggestions. I think we need to add a verb in the working goals, proactively protect and restore, because over the next 10 years, we do have to restore any areas that that are related in AB2. So actively pursuing opportunities to restore identified degraded areas. So I would add that there. And I was thinking we might need, are you static on the policies, or can we add one like just on restoring any damaged conservation areas?
Yeah, no, everything is definitely draft and up for discussion. So
That's the only thing. I mean, everything else looks pretty comprehensive of what everybody said, but I would just like add the restoring aspect, because that is a huge amount of land that needs to be restored, hopefully in the next decade.
okay. Keith and then Ranjan.
It works. As far as it'd be nice, probably something we should do, to add in other organizations to team up with when we try to areas in the future and get help. So like, like the Tucson Bird Alliance, the Sonoran Institute. I'm sure there's many others that are local experts. I know there's like the Cactus and Succulent Society that could so it would just be good to include them when we're making plans or when we're actually implementing these areas in the future.
Okay. And then Ranjan?
Thanks. I'm going to be a little slow in unmuting, and I have no idea if my camera's on, but thanks for bearing with me. By the way, I watched the video of everybody's comments. I was very impressed with the thoughtfulness of all the thoughts that were conveyed. I just had some terminology that I could suggest, because I heard people say, let's consider all living things, including the bottom of the food chain at the top. And so I was going to say, by the way, Melini, are we trying to get the working policy wording right, or does all of it matter?
So all of it, the goal, policy, and
Okay.
actions all matter. We're definitely, if we can add wording to make it clearer and meet
Okay.
what folks said we want to add in. But if it's just like,
Okay.
very specific wordsmithing, like instead of require, do this, we'll hold off on those ones.
Okay. When it comes to protecting wildlife, flora, and fauna, I was just going to suggest maybe put in the terminology, consider the full ecological cycle of
Mhm.
any actions taken by the town when it comes to development or movement of property or zoning of property. A full ecological cycle that considers the birds and the bees and the water and all that stuff.
Okay.
And then the second comment is I'm appreciating the fact that swallows and ironwoods are being singled out, or at least called out for protection. Aren't they already protected species in Arizona? And is it helpful to put in protect those two as required by law?
So they are, but Oro Valley, so AB3 actually is more stringent than the state does.
Got it.
So Oro Valley has stricter rules than the state.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So
Thank you.
yeah. Thank you. Anything else on AB1, AB2, C1? ABC or 1. It's like playing bingo. Okay, I'm going to move us a little down because Naranjan had a great segue into the other two on this chart, which is AB3 and ABC1. So this is regarding your comments about native plants. And definitely, as he suggested, we'll make sure we add language about the full ecological cycle to get all the different types of wildlife in there and insects as well. AB3 is what we do in practice, but I do think it's good to have in the 10-year plan, especially considering that most of the land areas that may be developed in the next 10 years may be annexations. And so this will make sure that applies to that, as well as ABC1 is to focus on annexations and making sure that conservation areas take priority over development. Sherry.
Okay. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. So I had a question regarding this particular section because we did have some conversations about pesticides and herbicides in common areas, and I won't go into all the details. So if we're looking 10 years down the road and we are trying to preserve, is it implied in the word preserve that that means we're going to try to avoid these chemical agents for controlling like weeds and those types of things, or do we have to be specific in the policy?
So to your point, there isn't anything about the pesticides. Now, we could definitely, I'd have to do some more research on what we could require from private properties. So a lot of this is
Right.
on HO, as you mentioned, common area that's privately maintained.
Yeah.
But, at least a good start as a model is the town doing something. So let me add that on the board as a potential add about it. Thank you for bringing it up and reminding me. And we'll look into what options there are.
Thank you.
Mhm. All right, looks like everyone's done reading. I'm going to move us down again. We can always go back though if you think of something. The next set, just going to kind of drag us over. We talked about maintaining and increasing open spaces. That included maintaining the existing open spaces. We talked about golf courses, how they also can be are part of the open space element. I will say for Vistoso Trails Nature Preserve, we do have some of that in here as well. It's under B1, and the last point we talked about removing invasive species, and then limiting the grading area. So I'm gonna, sorry, scoot us over a little bit. On here, you'll see the goal and policies were on the last one, so those are duplicates. And then A1, but if you want to look at A1, B1, A2, and B2 on this first little section. Rosa?
So again, just a little bit wordy cleanup. Remove invasive plant species throughout the town by, and then the publishing is good, developing programs is good, continuing, or just removing or requiring removal
Yeah.
instead of continuing to, because I mean that, and then the taking steps to eliminate at all town-owned facilities doesn't jive with that. Maybe put a verb in there in the beginning, like, focusing on all town-owned facilities, especially Vistoso Trails Nature Preserve or something like that to make it more parallel, because it just didn't flow. But other than that, I think you captured it there. And then I guess the goal is the same, proactively protecting and restoring. That'll just get fixed when the other one gets fixed. Yeah, I mean, it looks good.
Thank you, Rosa. And yes, appreciate the question. We will, any changes we make to the goal on the previous one, we'll make to all the duplicates of it too. Keith?
One other thing I would add to Rosa's comments is I think under somewhere in here we need to talk about educating the public, like educating people, educating even the people that are going to be brought in to help remove invasive plants. And I see information and resources, but nothing about educating people about it.
Okay, yep, thank you.
Mhm.
Next. And Neha?
Yeah, I just have a question. How specific does this have to be? So like in A2 where it says to add site coverage requirements and then B2 where it says implement best practices, do we have to talk about at all what the site coverage requirements are or the best practices are, or is that like a later committee will decide what those are?
So the site coverage that we would want to wait because that's a code amendment that we'd want to do more research on what surrounding jurisdictions do.
Okay.
And so there's not a direct answer to your question. It's a
Yeah.
balance. So in some instances, especially where this group feels it's needed, you want to be more specific to make sure it's very clear what the group was talking about and what people
Okay.
needed. In other instances, though, it's best to not be so super specific because, for instance, site coverage requirements that we'd want to do a lot more research as part of a code amendment to do that.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
And as staff, we're happy to help walk everyone through that as well. Sherry?
Yeah, my question is terminology. So I'm looking at A1, bullet 1, and we talk about managed development by requiring compact development and enabling flexible design options. But okay, and then it says clustering. So what's kind of confusing is starting out by saying requiring compact development, because below it's referred to in the next slide, it's referred to as compact design and cluster development. So is there a standard terminology for these types of actions when, as far as urban planning goes?
So we do have, I think we use cluster more than compact, but I will double check
Yeah.
to make sure we're consistent at least.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then Rosa?
I was just gonna say, because I was looking back at our notes, under B1, or maybe a B1A or something, we should mention something about beginning, a restoring process so that invasives are permanently eliminated. Because the problem with Vistoso trails is a vicious cycle of removing invasives in ways that people don't like having to use glyphosate if we get a lot of rain because it's impossible to manage it otherwise. So some aspect of, using, a restoration plan to permanently, eliminate the invasives. I don't know, because I just feel like we're just talking about like invasives that might be in other areas that are not like completely decimated. So, because there's a lot of that in Oro Valley where you can just go get like side of road invasive removal, but this is more of a, a bigger, I don't know, something to address the fact that permanent removal of invasives requires some type of restoration planning. And that's probably what needs to happen over a 10-year period rather than, a single plan for a year or a fiscal year or two. So.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, we can definitely work on the wording on that one. Okay, I'm going to move us down a little bit. So these comments were about aquifers, washes, and stormwater. The discussion I recollect was definitely about making sure stormwater is taken into account, especially if you start removing and how that affects native plants and especially downstream. Keith?
Yeah, so for A1, we're talking about infiltration into the groundwater from runoff. And one big way to help do that is to build some damming structures like gabion walls or one rock dams and such to control water. That'll cause it to build up and infiltrate, and then as it overflows, it keeps running downstream. So I think it'd be a good idea to try to do that in some of our areas where we can, like washes and potentially drainage areas, and even in neighborhoods you can do that. So.
Okay. So are you thinking to add maybe more details to this one?
Yeah, it's just another way of managing, a way to make infiltration easier. It's simple to do, and it works really well. So I don't know how to say it per se because the words are fairly vague. You can solve that a bunch of different ways, but that's just one good way I know of. A suggestion. I don't know how to put it in there as practice. So
Okay. Well, thank you, Keith.
Sure.
And then John, I think your hand is raised next. Yep.
Thank you very much. So Keith, was that Keith speaking?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, one thought, Keith, is with regard to infiltration into the groundwater, I was wondering if that should be a priority over perhaps water harvesting to do so many of the other things you guys have been saying, like counter the heat island effect, promote some native plant growth, though they don't really need water, but to get started. Only because from my understanding and my knowledge, we are actually recharging as much as we withdraw from our aquifer. And make no mistake, preservation of our underground aquifer is probably our top priority for sustainability in this area. So just wanted to throw that out, whether infiltration versus harvesting is a better consideration for us.
Okay. I will put that on here. And we will definitely talk more about about our water resources and conservation next Thursday. So yeah, that might even come out from that discussion too of what should take priority.
Question?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is Lyle Vandermeide. So my question is, or maybe comment, it says, design and capture stormwater. Do we have anything in here about like new home development? A brick driveway will help capture some of that stormwater and allow it to infiltrate, at the house where it actually rains versus a concrete driveway where it runs into the street more. I don't know, but like, new home design with driveways, et cetera, made out of brick as opposed to concrete will encourage that. Not quite sure how to say that, but I'm not sure if that's a requirement already in Oro Valley, but something to think about.
Okay, thanks, Lyle. We don't have anything in here. We do have design standards that do talk about drainage, so we can definitely add an action of maybe updating those to focus on more infiltration.
Yeah, if you keep it where it's at, then it doesn't have to go to the stormwater runoff areas and cause erosion and other things that can be bad.
Yep. Okay, thank you. We'll go Jeff and then Keith.
I have a question about, which I think it's a good idea to think about. So I just live on the Big Wash, that if we could slow down during a big event, the point is if we could slow down the flow rate downstream, that allows more infiltration. My question is, does anybody know if there are any regulations about diverting what would go downstream? I mean, do we owe anything to Tucson if we were to just essentially capture most or all of the water in the Big Wash so that it does infiltrate under Oro Valley? Do we owe Tucson anything? Do you understand my question? I mean, it's diverting a potential downstream resource.
Yeah, I do understand your question. I don't know the answer. However, I did see John and raised his hand. I don't know if that's because you knew the answer.
I'm not going to give a definitive answer, but you're absolutely right. Whoever the person was, forgive me. There are significant consequences to harvesting water from a stream. Even from the wash behind my home, I cannot harvest that water to be used for my plants and flora. But so that is a question that we probably have to get Peter Abraham to answer for us. He'd probably know more. But you are absolutely right. There's things we can do to slow down water elsewhere that's incident on roads and so forth, or divert if you want to promote growth and use that water for plant growth. That's what I meant when I meant water harvesting. Thank you.
So, Jeff, we can definitely follow up on that.
Yeah, okay. I think if there's no negative consequences, I'm all in favor of, I think we should all be in favor of trying to reduce flow during, as I said, I'm running on the Big Wash when there is an event, a couple times there's actually flow, it's moving awfully fast. It's eroding things, and it's water that could be used by us unless there are these consequences of us harvesting it. That's my point. So great. Let's find out about that and find out what that means for us.
Yep, we'll do. We also have a stormwater utility, so I'll check in with them as well to see what they know. Keith?
I was just gonna follow up on Lyle's comment, about the permeable surfaces, cement versus bricks. There are definitely more options now for bricks that allow for permeable surfaces more than traditional bricks, the way they're designed. So if there was any way to get contractors or people to use those, that would be great, because then you could hold your water locally on your property, which would be fantastic.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments on these ones? Before I move us on to the next column, does everybody accept these as heading in the right direction as first drafts? We will make all these revisions. And maybe a head shake, thumbs up, or if your camera's off, please raise your hand if you have more comments. All right, I'm gonna move us to the next one. So the next area we talked about was development patterns, specifically as they relate to environmental resources. We did talk about compact design, which as Sherry pointed out, we as staff have interchangeable words between compact and cluster design, so we'll clean that up a bit. But also making sure there's compatibility to the surrounding area. There were comments about what you could also do on large lots as well. So looking at, we're now, if you're following along on your own PDF, we're on page 3, which is your orange columns for resident working group guidance. And so we did have require percentage of open space, maintain riparian areas, concentrate development in portion of lands, and overall, it was just that there needs to be big areas of open spaces for connectivity. Then in terms of compatibility, it was limiting the amount of grading, but also sometimes large lots are more appropriate. So it's looking at those even to identify grading envelopes on those large lots, because we do know that the majority of grading violations in Oro Valley are people who who have a large lot and don't realize that there's areas they should have not touched, and they end up grading those. So to help that, it would be putting those envelopes on a plat. And then also, in terms of compatibility, is updating the design standards to make sure buildings blend with the natural environment. So we can look at this whole chart together because it's not super big. So looking at both goals, both policies, and then all 4 actions. Give everyone a moment. Oh, and I do want to mention in terms of requiring open space requirements, the town does have open space requirements, and I do believe they are greater than most of the surrounding areas. But the action that was on the previous set about having site percentages, site grading percentages, that would also help with that as well. It looks like folks are still reading. Give everyone a moment. And again, if you need to use the chat, you're welcome to do that as well. And we'll make sure to get your comment on the whiteboard. Rosa?
So the only thing that I think is a little weak is the word foster in the working goal, like as you go across on A1 update, and that's fine, maintain, and then foster, I would just say require, make it a little stronger since, we're basically saying we want to maintain our high standards. Everything else looks good.
Thank you. Are there other comments on this one? Not seeing any. All right, everybody accept these as headed in the right direction? Thumbs up, head nod. Okay, I'm gonna move us on then. So before we get into some of our conversation about climate and sustainability, I do want to do a check-in on the draft guiding principle. For those of you following on the PDF, this is at the bottom of the PDF, or of one of the pages, sorry. So what's shown on the left-hand side of the screen is what we heard over the past year. What's shown though on the right-hand side is the actual guiding principle. So what we did here is that the scenic beauty and natural environment is a top priority, and that's been a top priority in Oro Valley since the first general plan. Making sure that natural desert and mountain views are conserved, protecting native vegetation, wildlife corridors, expanding open space conservation area, and then prioritizing environmental resources. So does everyone think that this accurately captures what we heard over the past year, or are there any comments to make it more accurate based on your conversations this evening and a couple weeks ago? James.
Mute, sorry. There's probably some links to various government sites or other associations where we can really find what's native and what's, I'll call it, weeds or invasive species. I mean, that would be really helpful for this group as well as the general public. Okay, what is it that we should preserve? What is it that we should have landscapers, gardeners remove and get out of our environment?
Yeah, thank you, James. So I think that will also be captured in the action about publishing information about invasive species, but we could add to that as well.
Okay.
And I will say the town currently does have a list of invasive species and a list of approved plants for Oro Valley that are considered native plants. But to your point, we could probably promote and publish it more to the general public. It's mostly used by developers now. Rose and then Rosa. Oh, and Rose, you're muted.
Yeah, I just want to add to what James just said. It is confusing for people about the invasive species, and there is a list with the Arizona University that's a list of noxious weeds. And so there's a difference between noxious weeds that need to be controlled and invasive species. And perhaps there needs to be some clarification onto what we're talking about. And also the word native, we talked about that before. Should that be specific to the Sonoran Desert, or are we talking native Southwest? And one other thing I wanted to we talk about the beauty of the view of open space, and I don't know where it belongs in this, but when you see a beautiful Palo Verde trimmed and completely topped, and also with the lion's tails on it, I don't consider that beautiful, and I don't know where that should be in our discussion here, but I'd like to see some training done on landscapers and some regulations done on how we trim our native trees. There's, classes that these landscapers could take on how to do that. But if somebody wants to walk in front of Walmart right now, they topped all those Palo Verde trees, and it really is an eyesore.
So we do, thank you, Rose. We'll definitely get to landscaping maintenance here in a moment. So we did try to capture some of that, but please speak up if you think it needs more on it. In terms of the guiding principle, let me ask, I guess, folks, is for protecting significant native vegetation, we could put almost like what's written in what we heard, such as saguaros, ironwood trees, and velvet mesquites, just to give more kind of examples, if you will. Do you think that would help? Okay. And then Rosa?
So once again, under the, I was trying to figure out where it would fit, but under the 54% are concerned about protecting the environment, open space, limit development, prevent loss of habitat, connected pathways to wildlife. I was thinking there, prioritize environmental resource conservation and restoration when considering development, because a lot of times development rips out a lot more than they put back, and they do put some of it back, but just restoration, I think, is like a key thing that in the next 10 years is going to be, a focus where things are disturbed or were disturbed in a prior development or a prior use of a property. And then the use changes and you have to now restore it back to desert, which is the nightmare I find myself in every day. But I'm not saying this would happen, but if we were to close a golf course, let's say, then that becomes a huge restoration of the environment. We have to put the environment back because that's the only way to manage the situation that we have learned very much through the experiment in my backyard. So if you don't put it back, then what you do is you grow invasives, which is something we're trying to get rid of. So it's kind of like they go hand in hand. So maybe adding that restoration, environmental resource conservation and restoration when considering development.
Thank you, Rosa. All right. Any other comments on the guiding principle?
You just see my hand just for a moment.
Yes, no.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna be careful here.
No, you're good.
I just want to include the words environmental impact. I'm not trying to promote, spending a lot of money on environmental impact assessments, but somewhere on the last bullet or so forth, so when you consider development, you always need to consider the environmental impacts to, once again, the ecological cycles or what's happening in that local area. So ecological impact, environmental impact.
Okay. Let me ask the group a question. So on this last bullet, do you think it's stronger to say prioritize environmental resource conservation and restoration versus consider environmental impact? In terms of the guiding principle. Now, we could definitely add more about environmental impacts to the goals, policies, or action. But wanted to hear your guys.
I would make sure you put environmental impact somewhere, but I would leave this environmental resource conservation and restoration because I think both are needed.
And then Keith, and then Sherry.
I wanted to suggest we add where you say maintain wildlife corridors. I would argue that we need to also develop or create them as well.
Okay. And then Sherry and then Andy.
Yeah, I was wondering about the conserve the natural desert. I'm not sure this fits here, but I'm thinking Honeybee Canyon and some of the native petroglyphs and other things. Is that considered as part of the environment and climate, or is that like a separate discussion point for another group?
So it's
Right.
definitely part of our open space areas. It's also
Yeah.
a historical and cultural resource as well.
Okay.
It's both.
So do we need to add that here, conserve the natural desert, historical resources and mountain views or something like that?
So I would, so we do have that addressed in another guiding principle, but I will double check to make sure it's the wording on that.
Okay, thank you.
And then Andy?
Yeah, in answer to your question, Malini, about prioritizing environmental resource conservation, it does seem like a pretty strong statement, but maybe you could just add and minimizing environmental impact when considering development. So both the positive, encouraging, the environment and avoiding the most severe impacts could both be listed there together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. All right. Other comments on the guiding principle? Okay, so before we move on to our next area, I do just want to let folks know that again, we are making sure that we are meeting our legal requirements for the plan. So we don't specifically need to go through all of these because they are duplicates, and we will address all the changes in these as well. But I just want to make sure you all are aware that we do have legal requirements with regards to environment, open space, and conservation from the state. And so we have a couple pages on those. So I am not going to spend, again, a whole lot of time on those. If you have any questions on the legal requirements, though, staff is available. And none of those are new, so we'll make the updates. Okay, then before we hop over to climate, we did also talk about views. Specifically, this group talked about light pollution and ways to minimize it, as well as building heights. So again, if you're following along, we're now on the purple page. So looking at light and visual pollution, not having billboards, balancing light pollution with safety issues, controlling lighting, and enforcing the lighting code. We also then talked about building height, of limiting height, placing taller buildings in areas that don't block views, and that because taller buildings are okay as long as they're in lower areas. So again, we can look at this whole table, I think, as one. So we're on goals 5 and 6. There's 2 policies and then 5 actions. So let everyone take a moment. The first 3 are the lighting ones, and the second 2 are more about height. And I do want to let you know when it comes to height, we did discuss this also with another resident working group who went into more detailed discussions about specifically about apartments, which is why those are also more detailed than maybe what this group discussed. Okay, it looks like most folks are done reading. If you need more time, please take it. Any comments, questions, or points of clarification for this one? Sherry and then Rose.
Yeah, so the A1, the third bullet says support regional efforts. Is there anything else that should be added to that, or could that be combined with the first bullet to say identify best practices and support regional efforts to minimize light pollution? I'm just wondering if maybe something's missing from the third bullet.
Yeah, I think we can definitely combine it with the first one, as you said.
Okay, sounds good.
Then Rose and then Rosa.
Yeah, I just wondered what is our building height restrictions? I don't remember reading that.
In terms of what this group talked about, or in general, we
In
already.
general, what is Oro Valley's restrictions for building height?
So most places, the max building height is about 25 feet. There are some though that go higher, 36. There are even places with 48. It really depends on what zoning district you're in. But in addition to that, are along Oracle and along Tangerine, they specifically have even lower building heights to protect the mountain views.
Okay, I wonder if we should have that in there, you know, what our building height requirements are, and if we're gonna say it should be taken into consideration, should we be saying, you know, specific heights? Just a thought.
Yeah, in terms of putting all of our current building heights in there, I would caution the group on that, because they are already in the zoning. And it is, I mean, they'd range for every zoning districts and within our PADs. So, and they could change, but that would go through a review process.
Okay.
But we could definitely add in if the group thinks it's worthwhile, about continuing to, enforce the scenic corridor overlays, things of that nature. So it's a little broader, but it's still capturing what we already do, if that works. If that, gets maybe to what you were talking about.
Yeah, we don't want to reproduce the code in the building codes in this.
Yeah, so we can definitely add something about the scenic corridors, though. And areas that it is restricted currently in code to make sure that the views are maintained. Okay. And then Rosa, I think.
I have a quick one on that, restricting apartments over 3 stories in scenic corridor areas, just add that to that. And then you, I mean, wherever you think you should add scenic corridor, but yes, the scenic corridor is where that really applies when things get over 3 stories. And then for the lighting, A1, maybe work with HOAs for residential lighting issues. There are a lot of people who wrap Christmas lights around everything year round. And, I have nothing against, doing that when you have company or, occasionally, but I can tell you, I look out on the preserve at night and I can't tell you how many people have a lot of lighting going on, if you know what I mean. And that really affects wildlife a lot. It just changes their patterns of behavior and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of people just leave their Christmas lights up year round, like the white lights, on the thing. So that's an HOA thing.
Mhm.
But I know it's supposed to be based on town code because the HOAs are supposed, it is in most of the CCNRs not to do that. Like you're supposed to have your 30 days, you know, from, you know, right before Christmas and 30 days or whatever, however many days after there's a limit to when you're lighting up your property. But there's a lot of violations out there because nobody's doing anything about it. So then it proliferates, you know what I mean? Like, so anyway, I would add that because that's become a huge thing in Oro Valley in the last, I would say, few years since I've lived here, with people just wrapping everything in lights, palm trees, you know, saguaros, you know, and it's like, okay, that's not a dark sky initiative. But anyway, I would just add something about working with HOAs to enforce lighting codes.
Yep. And to your point, all the residential lighting code violations are on a complaint basis. So we could definitely let HOAs know of, hey, you need to contact the town if this is happening. Okay. Before we move on, I do want to just ask a point of clarification. So Rosa, you brought up restricting apartments over 3 stories in scenic corridors. I do know in other groups, we've talked about just in general, not having apartment communities over 3 stories. Does this group, right now, the way it's worded, it's definitely stricter, where if we add in scenic corridors, that focuses on 2 areas. But what does this group think about that in terms of restricting those apartment communities over 3 stories just in scenic corridors, or leaving it more broad for the whole community? Andy?
Well, I do support the idea of high density housing, but I'm trying to imagine a 3-story building along Tangerine, and it seems like you would no longer know that there are mountains to the south, east, or west. You would just be driving on a generic road through generic buildings. And even if there was a pretty big setback, still seems like that would be true. So I'm kind of yeah, having trouble with that. Three seems really high, especially. It's one thing, just one final thought. If it's at a particular intersection, there's some development, but then you proceed down the road and you can see mountains again and some open space, you know, it's still nice. But if it becomes continuous all along the whole main road there, we would have lost our scenic aspect. So yeah, I'm kind of torn on that one, but it seems like that might be too lenient actually to say, to just limit the height or not say anything about the setback or the continuous nature of the development along the road. That's about all I can think of, though. I'm not sure what the answer is.
Nope. Thank you, Andy.
So I'm not sure how to raise my hand.
Oh, it's okay, Lyle.
So I would say on building height, I really like the way it's worded under the guidance right now. Limit building height, place taller buildings in locations that do not block views. And the next one, you know, as I drive along First Avenue now, you know, there's that new development on the, I guess it's the east side of the road, you'd call it, where I think it's a retirement community or some type of community that's being built. It was probably approved, I don't know, it was 10 years ago or whatever. And it probably is over 3 stories, I'm guessing, or it looks tall. I don't see where it affects the view because of the lay of the land. It doesn't affect anything. But I wouldn't want to have a house or be in a neighborhood and then have, you know, a 4-story apartment building go up behind me. You know, because then you would lose your view for whatever house you have. That wouldn't be necessarily, I won't say fair to that people in that neighborhood. So I don't know if that's what your question was or not. So I think scenic corridor is, you know, I think that's not restrictive enough almost. But we also need to say, hey, you know, if you're putting it in a valley where it doesn't restrict other people's views, then maybe it's okay. You know, there's a give and a take there a little bit.
Yeah, and so we tried to differentiate between taller buildings and valleys, like you said, in the first bullet point, and then just the restricting for 3 stories would just be apartments.
Yeah.
Those kind of larger ones. And then an A2 is, to your point, Lyle, which is a good point, is making sure apartments even 2 to 3 stories are mitigated from single family homes or existing homes.
Yes. Okay.
And then Rosa?
So after hearing all that, I don't know that the scenic corridor is necessary. I mean, isn't Tangerine a scenic corridor anyway? Tangerine.
is.
Road. Yeah, and so that was home to one of the biggest controversies we've ever had, and that was Marketplace. And even though it is in a kind of a low line, like right off of the setback, it goes down, it was still rejected by the public. So I wouldn't want anybody to, you know, kind of like look at that and, you know, get confused. I think the way you have it is good, that restricting apartments over 3 stories and identifying appropriate locations for the 2 and 3 story apartment communities is good. So I wouldn't complicate it, I guess, because I don't want anyone to think that we're trying to say, you know, if long as it's on a scenic corridor, we can do it, you know, because people still get upset about apartments. So yeah, I would just leave it. I think it's good the way it is.
All right, thank you, Rosa, and appreciate everyone's comments on that to clarify. Okay, I'm gonna move us on to the next one. Again, I'm just assuming with the silence that everybody's in acceptance that they're headed in the right direction, and you'll raise your hand if not. Okay, the next thing we talked about was heat mitigation. This was as you can see, great conversation. Talked about architecture design, looking at even awnings and making sure there's shade, the different building materials that can be used. So thank you, Jeff, and those who brought up even the different bricks and sidewalk opportunities. We also talked about landscaping, and then this is Rose, where we talked a little bit about the pruning and making sure people know exactly how to landscape areas appropriately. And then under other ideas, we talked about parking lots and trails, I believe, pavement. So I'm going to move us down if you're following along. This is now your pink or red page. So under architectural design, we did talk a lot about roof colors, and that should say in that first bullet under A1, for as an FOR, not fur. That was a typo, but we talked about roof colors and using lighter colors, but also making sure that the architectural style is still fits Oro Valley. Building materials, using more sustainable and eco-friendly materials, especially the types that will help cool a building. Under landscaping and maintenance, we talked about low water native plants, and then that is where the education about how to maintain and irrigate plants came in. And then also the process, we talked about turf and helping people remove it from yards and more shade trees. So let's start with the first 2 before we go on to the other column. So we're on goal 7, policies A and B. And then actions A1 through A3 and B1 through B3. And give everyone a moment to read through this. Then Andy?
I have a question about B3. Is
Mhm.
that intended to encourage removal of grass and the irrigation needed for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. So we do have some HOAs that still have grass in their common areas or entries.
Okay.
So this hopefully would help encourage them to replace that with more natural landscaping like rock or something else.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what comes to mind for me is artificial turf.
Mm.
And with this, my concern would be that this might encourage more use of enormous amounts of plastic for artificial turf. So, yeah, that would be addressed if we just added what you said, returning that to more natural landscape.
Yeah, we could definitely add that it's removing natural turf and or some, I don't know the exact wording, but
Replacing.
replace
Yeah.
with
Uh,
so it's not replacing with artificial turf.
yeah.
And then Nihar?
This might just be me, but following up on B3, when it says streamline the process, I'm a little confused. What process are we talking about? And is it possible to define that in the
Yeah,
sentence?
so oh sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I finished.
My apologies. So right now, for instance, if you're an HOA and you want to remove grass from your like entry or your park area, you have to submit a revised landscape plan, which sometimes also then requires a consultant, a landscape architect to hire them, submit the plan, have it reviewed. You then get a grading permit that also has bonds associated with it. And then once you get the permit, you do the work and there's inspections associated with it. So there just might be opportunities, and I don't know what they are yet, but there might be opportunities to help that be a little easier for folks if this group thinks it should be prioritized to remove if we should be encouraging the removal of natural turf. Did that help answer your question, Nihar?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Thank you.
And then Rosa?
I think, yes, I think that should stay. Just because I didn't realize that we had all that, because I know they just redid the entryway to Rancho Vistoso. So yeah, anything that would help make that a streamlined process, I think that's definitely a good idea. As for replacing it with AstroTurf, I think we should have a prohibition because the whole idea here is to reduce heat island, and plastic neither reduces heat island nor does it help us. We have plastic in our brains. We need to stop using plastic. So I would somewhere in there mention not encouraging AstroTurf.
Mhm.
I don't know then what you do about rock, because that does increase heat, but I guess anything that reduces, because this isn't about water per se, because there's a whole separate area on that, but there's overlap and water is the key. But I would definitely put in here somewhere, but not encouraging plastic or AstroTurf, because I really think that stuff is horrible.
Mhm. Okay. Then Jeff, then Rose.
Okay, so I am admitting that I did not understand what natural turf meant. I've actually worked with turf in terms of landscaping, and I don't think there is any natural, as in native turf here. I would like us to put the word living or something other than natural in there. I mean, we're talking about removing this living stuff. And I will echo, we definitely do not want to encourage anybody to put down any green plastic. The temperature on that thing is actually lethal to anything that steps on it. But if we could, in parens or something, identify the natural, we're talking about actually like living Bermuda grass that people have planted somewhere. I'm probably not going to be the only one that would be confused by that reading this.
Yep.
I get the point now during the discussion what's going on, and I'm all in favor of it. I just want to make sure that we're clear that we're talking about living grass, which we do not want to replace with plastic grass. We want to replace it with something else. That's all.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And yeah, I think to you and Andy's point, we'll revise natural turf and probably even use the word grass so everybody knows what we're talking about. And then Rose?
Yes, since the community guidance is about prioritizing reducing the heat island effect, I think we should have something in there that says identifying heat islands in the city and maybe educating the public or maybe giving them discounts on trees to plant in these heat island areas. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Rose. Okay, I'm going to move us down. The other comments we talked about parking areas, and as part of that, it was breaking up the areas. We also talked about incentivizing somehow for businesses to add more solar covered parking, excuse me. So now we're on C, C1, and C2. Rosa?
So I see that we had said in one of our suggestions, like break up parking lots with landscaping. Can we add that into C1 somewhere? Like, because we're trying, excuse me, we're trying to reduce the amount of paved areas using landscaping to mitigate some of the heat of paved areas. Like, what we said basically, like islands in the parking lots that provide some shade or landscaping to offset the heat and to offset the amount of just impervious space, just, continual hard space.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, we could definitely edit that last bullet point to make it stronger, to your point. And then Sherry and then Jeff.
Yeah, on C1 bullet 3, it says enable the minimum needed for business. Do you mean minimum parking standards or the minimum spaces? Could we clarify that?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And what we intended was the minimum amount of parking spaces. So
Okay.
there are some towns who actually even got rid of parking requirements and let the businesses
Decide.
They have to prove that they have enough parking to meet their market demand. In Oro Valley, we do have parking standards, and there is some flexibility to do less or more, but we could maybe take that further.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. But we can add words in there to make sure it's clear what we're talking about. And then Jeff.
So I wonder if on C, if we should be also encouraging some sort of research or planning on things about how to break up parking areas with vegetation. And I am specifically thinking, I think it was July 2023. So I'm on the north edge of Oro Valley. In July 2023, I'm going to say there that I saw more than 100 Palo Verdes that had been blown over during the windstorm that had been planted very nicely in the marketplace and everywhere else. Those, we should not make I'm gonna say that was a mistake, that there's other vegetation and other ways to break up those parking lots, and we should not make that mistake again. If those of you that can remember seeing that as well, and I'm thinking it was July, August in 2023. Some research on what should be planted or not planted in various places, I think maybe should be in our thinking here on in the wording here somewhere to make wise decisions about how this is done. And again, I am really thinking specifically about Palo Verde everywhere, which look beautiful until we have a bad windstorm, and then there's just a bunch of trees that are blown down. Okay, so that's that. Some kind of planning or research or determining what it is that should be in these. I'm in favor of the idea here, but let's make sure we're putting the right things in the ground.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Yep,
Thanks.
we can add that in. And then Keith?
The only other thing I can think of is related to parking is, and it's kind of our discussion earlier about designing the areas with, again, permeable surfaces versus just all cement or all asphalt. And then maybe also controlling how things run off and how water is managed, water collection. So I don't know if that's a good place to put that here, but it's just a thought for the standards. So
Yep. And right now we do require the landscape islands to also function as water collection areas too.
good.
But we can definitely make sure that's continued.
So just to go along with that comment, when you go, a lot of other states, lived in Illinois for a long time, all the parking lots that are built in the last 25 years have huge areas that basically in a big rainstorm, the water goes to, and then it slowly drains into the rivers and streams to prevent, a large runoff event basically from happening. And I don't know if we've got that in our design for, large areas, parking lots, et cetera, that are built new or not. But that is something that we should probably look into if it's possible. I don't know if it's possible with, the way the washes are supposed to work around here.
Yeah, nope. Good comment. We could definitely look into that. And then, yeah, revise C1 to make sure we're including water collection in the parking areas. Okay. Not seeing any other hands raised, so I'm going to continue us on. So the next thing we talked about was recycling and waste programs. We talked a lot about the need for more recycling education. And then with regards to recycling programs, it was, I think many of you commented that there needs to be programs for electronics, appliances, batteries, things of that nature. Also that recycling needs to extend beyond what traditional recycling is, so also that reuse aspect. We had a great conversation where Nihar shared his resource about the group who takes plastic and makes bricks out of it. And then we also talked about composting and needing drop-off sites for that. I do want to remind everyone, the water conservation, we still have your comments. We will be adding those to the board for next Thursday, and we'll definitely talk about those more next Thursday. So right now there aren't actions, policies, or goals for water harvesting, but those will come. So looking again at recycling education and programs, we also talked about partnerships in this one as well, of different places to help with education, doing more community-wide events, and then encouraging businesses even to reduce their plastic use and having more drop-off sites. So let's focus on, we can do this whole table as one. So we're on goal 8, policy A, and then A1 through A6. And I'll give everyone a moment to read through it And if you're on the document at home, it's the blue page, the column with the blue column, the page with the blue columns. Nihar?
Yeah, for A1, the non-traditional recycling, instead of just saying placing recycling bins with information at town facilities, is it possible to make it a waste disposal event or a drive like A4 has so then more people come out and actually do it rather than just be it placing recycling bins and having no one know about it?
Yeah, so maybe we can definitely add to even, yep, we can add as a even to maybe A2, expand that about having a community-wide recycling event.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then Andy?
Yeah, I just wanted to plus one that last comment because I think we're in a situation now where people are disillusioned even about designated recycling bins.
Hmm.
You know, you look into any particular recycling bin and there's garbage in it. And you look in the garbage and there's recyclable stuff in there. And we just don't have confidence that even if we put it in the right place, it'll get recycled. So I think if we're going to try this at all, it has to have some high profile education that says we're doing something different, you know, something new. Um, so yeah, public education will be an important part of that.
Okay, thank you, Andy. And then Keith?
I don't know where to add it quite in here, but one thing we should consider for businesses or even large facilities like hospitals and such, even utility districts and such, teaming up with like an organization like Sustainable Tucson and getting audits done, how to reduce waste and how to recycle properly, would be a good thing to do in the future. And you know that is being developed now, and could take advantage of it in the future. So
Just a point of clarification. So we did leave it broader under A1. We just put partner with the library and other organizations to help distribute information or provide educational workshops. Are you also saying partner with them to work with businesses to provide?
yeah,
Okay.
yes, because then they could come in and help them audit themselves and how to reduce waste and how to recycle properly, and also where to take things or where to actually send things. So
Thank you
okay.
for the clarification.
Yep.
And then Rose?
Yeah, I'd like to also say, you know, that we need a strong educational process for the public for recycling, because that's an important part of it. Also, I'd like to be a lot stronger with plastic bags. I'd like to eliminate plastic bags in the grocery stores and stores in town I think Oro Valley is, ready for that. That would make a huge difference. Also, I think we need to mention not only composting programs, but a compost pickup at the houses.
Mhm.
It's like you have a trash barrel, you have compost pickup every other week.
Okay, so in A5, we try to have suitable locations for composting, but you're saying have it at homes.
Yeah, I think it needs to be a home pickup. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Just one moment. And then Jeff, and then Andy.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask a question about that last point about home pickup for composting. I'm guessing it would be incredibly expensive for the amount of material that was collected. Does anybody have any hard numbers on what that would cost, and any idea about how much participation there would actually be?
So I do think that would probably be something right now that the town would be looking to partner with somebody on versus doing it, because we don't do any waste type of disposal or services. That's all through private or Pima County. But we could add something about looking for partnerships. And then Rose, I don't know if you had anything to add.
Yeah, just to add to it, I just had it for 20 some years in Colorado, so I'm kind of used to it. So I could look into it. EcoCycle is a pretty well-known resource for that in Boulder County. They pick up every other week. The waste management picks up in Boulder and in Longmont. They have, and the other cities around, they have their own city pickup, and they have their own composting facilities where you can go in and then pick up compost for, yourself, or they bag it up and sell it, So I'm not sure, with the difference in, the desert environment, it might be different here, but it's, it's something we should look into, I think.
Well, I'm not disagreeing we should look into it, but Boulder and vegetation that people are growing in Boulder is way different than, I would have almost nothing to contribute here. If I lived in Boulder, I'd probably have a lawn and landscaping things. I'm just thinking there's not going to be much participation here, and I'm not sure how we're going to be able to get somebody to devote a bunch of really expensive trucks driving around to pick up little tiny bits of things every once in a while is my concern.
Yeah, I see much more than little bits in my neighborhood here that goes into the landfill, goes directly into the landfill. So I don't know if it's my neighborhood or what, but I see the landscapers, taking truckloads full of tree limbs and that sort of thing on a daily basis. So
okay, no, that's fair, but I think I think we should do some research on this up front before we go too far down the road.
Definitely,
Yeah.
but this
And
is
I think,
plan.
sorry. Yeah, I think for the plan, we would want to be more broad, right? We're not going to get into the specifics of all of it. It could just be, and to Jeff's, both your points, more of just explore possibility or work with Pima County to see if there's possibility for composting. So we can keep it more broad in terms of.
Yeah. And Rose, you're aware that all the landscape trucks go to a facility that does compost?
No, I'm not aware, because in our neighborhood
it's down
here,
by Sweetwater where the sewage treatment plant is it off Ina? It's a huge place. All the landscape trucks dump there. And I think they also dump
tanks
at
you're talking about.
at the place out by the where the wildlife bridge is on Oracle. And then that gets transferred from there in a larger truck so that they're not burning as much fuel down to the big, huge countywide facility. It's a massive facility.
And if I may, just for time, we could definitely talk more about specifics about composting, but maybe to just bring the conversation up a little bit in the 10-year plan, we can put more about exploring the opportunities or something of that nature.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I think Andy, though, you were next, and then Keith, and then Lyle, if I think you may have been trying
Okay.
to speak.
Yeah, yeah, the woody debris, I wonder if that's really composting or if it's just being kind of chipped, so that it can be turned into mulch. But that's detailed. We were just asked not to bring it up a level. But yeah, I came from area in a town in Oregon with curbside pickup for compost, and when you really start paying attention, there's a lot that can be composted, and then that way it degrades by in the presence of oxygen and is not as harmful to the atmosphere as if it's buried and then decomposes and produces methane, my understanding. Also, I wanted to give a strong thumbs up on the working toward eliminating plastic bag use. Reusable bags work just as well. It just takes a little bit of planning and some peer pressure from your community. We're addicted to plastic bags, and I hate seeing them stuck to all our beautiful saguaros along both sides. That's all.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. And then
Yeah,
Lyle, you want to
if
go?
I can go.
Yep.
So composting, absolutely in favor of some composting. I'd like us to start with something at the library or, at the city building basically, or somewhere else. Partner with the city of Tucson. They've got a composting program that they're starting up, with 5-gallon buckets. We were doing it with the University of Arizona's garden section. They have 5-gallon buckets. You'd be amazed how long it actually takes you to fill up a 5-gallon bucket of compostable, material from your house. So honestly, I'd have to agree with the other person that said home pickup might be a little extreme. But if you did home pickup for yard waste once a month or something, there might be some value there for the people that don't hire landscapers. I don't hire a landscaper, so my, landscape waste that I have does go in the garbage can because I have no other option. So, anyway.
Yep. Thank you, Lyle. And then Andy put in the chat that maybe it's starting off with drop-off sites, but then increasing to curbside pickup to help evaluate use and need. Keith, I think you were next.
Yeah, I just want to add to Lyle's comment. So, the community gardens of Tucson I mentioned in our last meeting has teamed with the city of Tucson, have 4 drop-off locations in Tucson for household organic waste that they make into compost. And I think we could team up with that effort and put something like that in Oro Valley, and it could be at city offices or wherever, but it isn't fully in place and it's working quite well. So
Okay, thank you, Keith. The additional information. Okay, any other comments about the recycling programs and education? I think from what I heard from Rose earlier and from some of the others is we will probably add a separate action about education versus keeping it all in A1, just because it does seem like it needs to be a priority. Andy.
Yeah, I just remembered about related to the buy block, the plastics that are used to make those plastic construction blocks.
Mhm.
They call them hard to recycle plastics.
Mm.
And I wonder if that would be good to include in the A4 waste disposal events.
Yep, hard to recycle plastics.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna move us on. So kind of continuing about programs, we talked also about solar and energy efficient appliances. We talked about rebates and discounts, and also similar about recycling was just education and promotion about solar. Then we also talked about electric vehicles and charging stations, specifically privately owned charging stations, encouraging them at in commercial areas, possibly even common areas, but also single family homes, having them in garages, which is becoming more popular. And I think we have, yep, and then sorry, our other category we wrapped our conversation up with last time was just in general about reducing carbon emissions, and for climate and sustainability is also traffic is involved in that. Looking at public transportation, making sure traffic flow is efficient. And then there were some other comments about steam pump, golf cart users. So we'll fit those in other areas. But some of the comments here were also about the workshop seminars and also having an Earth Day event, which we just talked about, having community events, but then also a plan. So the town does not have a climate plan, resiliency plan. So now I'm on kind of the table with a bunch of different colors. Starts off with green, then goes to blue and gray. We can talk in terms of time, we'll talk about all these at once. So the first ones are about the solar energy, the second group is about the electric vehicle charging stations, and then the third row is more about that climate resiliency and sustainability plan. I do want to mention, and I should have brought it up on the last one, but in the last chart, we do have you guys brought up a really good, you tied together the recycling of appliances as a way to also help people get new, more energy efficient appliances. So we tied that together on the last chart, but I can go back there if you would like. Give everyone a moment to read these. We're on 8, B, C, and then B1 through B4 and C1 through C3. Andy.
On, let's see, where is it? B2.
Mhm.
I feel like we should clarify a little bit what we mean by community solar program. Does that mean you buy a share in a solar facility that's somewhere besides your own rooftop? Is that what that means? Or you invest, you give a loan to a program that allows someone else to buy solar? All of the above?
So I will
Because
actually meet, oh, sorry, go ahead.
that might be misinterpreted. I mean, people might interpret that differently. And
So I may defer actually to Keith. I think you brought this up last time. If not, I'll give what I think it is. But Keith, if you want to speak more to it.
Yeah, I can comment. So it's community solar is I guess, it could be in a community, it could be a region of a city where you have a localized solar facility or set of solar panels and power generation that then you can buy into shares, or you can get credits, reduce your energy bills, and know that you're getting energy from this solar facility versus getting it all from other sources. So it's not typically, you giving money to somebody to go put something on their home. That's not the way it works. So
So is it kind of like a blue sky program where you just opt to pay for solar infrastructure, or is there
you you
some
you
measure of
you
sort of
you
local
you buy
is
shares
there
and get solar. Yeah, you buy shares, get the solar infrastructure put in place, and then your benefit after that is you get reduced electric bills and sometimes credits,
okay,
depending on how much
is
you're
there any
generating, how much people are using. So
question, is there any aspect of kind of local resilience where your neighborhood might be up and running even if there was an outage elsewhere?
that that's true. It's possible. I mean, you probably wouldn't get enough power for every home to be up, but you could probably get some of that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
Thank you, Keith.
yep.
And then Rosa?
So I wanted some clarification on the C3, create climate resilience and sustainability plan to establish townwide measures for reducing waste and greenhouse emissions. What kind of waste? Like, I was a little confused about that one.
Okay. We can clarify that as well. So we're also thinking of pulling in some of those recycling programs into
Oh.
it. So right now, the town does do a lot in terms of sustainability, but it's all through different departments and kind of each department does its own. I know Tucson has one. I believe a lot of surrounding jurisdictions do have kind of these climate plans, action plans, if you will, that ties it all together. And that's what we don't have.
Okay, so reducing energy waste? Is it energy waste or is it just, I'm just getting hung up on the language. I guess
Yeah.
establish townwide measures for just conservate, like, I mean, this whole thing is on more, well, solar. Is this specific to solar or is it just
No,
any
so
of
this was under one of the other
energy?
comments. It was just saying, in the other column, somebody had made a comment about, making sure there's a plan and making sure businesses are also involved in
Okay,
that planning
so
effort.
energy, like energy waste and then the greenhouse gas emissions, I'm just trying to figure out how that fits with that. Anyway, I think you should toy with that one a little bit, make it a little clearer, but other than that, I mean, this is a framework. I think it can go forward. I mean, it's definitely accomplishing a lot. It's the catch-all to everything that didn't fit anywhere else, but yeah, it's good.
That's a good way to put it. It kind of would be. It would be taking everything that's on here and putting more details to it and getting even further with all these aspects in almost like, if you will, so the town has, for instance, we have a transportation plan, we have a Parks and Rec plan. So it'd be kind of, we have a trails plan. So this would be kind of the climate plan to get those details. Yep, and Sherry also got your comment about making sure we add a detail of what the plan tries to accomplish. That I think would also help clarify what Rosa's getting to as well. Okay, Keith?
Yeah, I agree with Rosa. A sustainability and resilience plan definitely is going to involve way more than just those two topics. So, I mean, I'd suggest you go look at Tucson's plan that they put together. It's quite well worded, but again, I think it does need to be reworded.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely work on fleshing that out a little bit more so everybody understands what it aims to do and is. And thank you, Keith, for the Tucson. We'll look at theirs.
Sure.
Okay. So the last part of the conversation was focused on transportation. So this included making sure our roadways are efficient and having plans for bus routes. I will let you know that we did have a resident working group that just focused solely on transportation. So a lot of these come from their conversations as well. So there is a lot more detail on these than what you guys discussed, but that's where that level of detail comes from, is they went into depth about transportation, specifically about light timing, traffic flow, efficiency, and then also with regards to not only bus routes, but the dial-a-ride program, park and ride lots, things of that nature. So I wanted to include it all just so you guys were aware, and then also get your feedback on these as well. So now we're on the gray chart, looking at 9, 10, and then A1 through A4. Both A's and both A1s through A4s. Keith.
I was just thinking after reading these, is there any incentives now for like carpooling and ride shares in Oro Valley?
I don't believe there are incentives. I mean, we do have the park and ride lots. I don't think now employers may offer their own incentives. I'm not sure about that, but not from the town. We don't have
Okay.
any.
Is it feasible to offer such a thing? I don't know.
We could explore options maybe for town employees. I don't know if it would be feasible to do town-wide. And it depends on what the incentives are also. You know, if it's money or monetarily, that might be difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
I am putting it down though, Keith, so we can look into that more and see what the options could be. And maybe that is just it's encouraging employers to do that as well.
Sorry, I have something else.
Yeah.
The other thing looking at this is how about like, we talked a lot about other options, so like biking, like electric bikes, or I don't see any of those in Oro Valley, but I see them quite a bit in Tucson now.
Yeah, so
But-
we do have a whole also, and I apologize, I can send those out to the group. We also had we do have a lot of goals, policies, and actions about pedestrian and cyclist connectivity, safety, and even including e-bikes, of getting not just more information for people on e-bikes, like where they can ride, what the regulations are, and kind of putting that down, because as you mentioned, it's newer, but it's definitely going to continue to increase. So we do have some of those, they're just not on this board. And we will be sending out all the group's goals, policies, and actions to everyone, so you'll see each group's work and continue to help identify gaps. Okay, not seeing any more hands on this. I'm gonna, Naranhan? John, sorry.
No problem. I'm actually finally stable, so I haven't been able to contribute to wordsmithing because I haven't been able to see anything. A general comment before we conclude. There's been so many wonderful ideas and policies and guidances brought forward. Does the town have an environmental resource officer? Or who would be the point person, not to have the answers, but to direct people or town to the resources that would have the answers? And would the town consider such a person? I mention it because we know enough and we value enough water that we have a water conservation manager dedicated to that. If any of these or some of these are embraced, could that be something that a small percentage of the budget could be devoted to? And I don't know what you call him, but the go-to person to get the right answers to guide all these policies.
So right now it's all under planning. There used to be a conservation and sustainability manager. It used to actually be my boss. He's now the planning manager, but that position was there for a while and then it got folded in to planning. As we are a lot of the environmental resource preservation and even conservation areas are tied to zoning. So that's why it now is wrapped up into planning. So he was that position, but it did get removed.
Thank you.
If that helps. Okay. And is everybody, it's 7:29. I don't want to rush the guiding principle. Is everybody okay staying for 5 more minutes to go through this? Okay, so the last thing is the climate and sustainability guiding principle. We have on the left-hand side what we heard from residents over phase 1. On the right-hand side is the guiding principle itself. As you can see, most of the wording in the guiding principle is taken from the wording that was that people were responding to. But any comments, questions, or revisions to this? Andy?
Yeah, I'll just phrase this as a question. Should we call out converting gas to electric as a desirable direction to move gradually? Is that worth? We say energy efficient, but I like using gas, but my understanding is that as electric energy becomes more sustainably produced, and with the advent of heat pumps and anyway,
Yeah.
we can say that is more efficient to phase
Yeah,
out.
we may.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. We could definitely maybe include that more as a goal policy action. I would suggest for the group in the guiding principle, we leave it broad, knowing in 10 years there could be who knows what in terms of energy efficiency technology. We might want to leave it broad, but we can definitely work on I think in the policies or something about renewable energy, so we could also look at maybe giving examples or I don't know, something there.
Yeah, sounds good.
So I'm sorry, so Andy, you're talking about gas for your water heater and your stove?
Correct.
Replacing that with some, newer technology, very, very high efficiency water heating system. Okay, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most especially in new development.
Yes, okay. I just want to make
Or
sure. Yep.
having incentives, subsidies for upgrades, retrofits.
Yep. So I think that's definitely one we can add as an action.
So just to give a little more thing to, I think, Andy's comment on gas, now that I have solar on my roof, I think to myself, gee, it'd be nice not to have to pay a gas bill for hot water. I do like cooking with gas, but my gas furnace, and they'd be, the gas furnace would be very expensive to, convert over to electric. So it's something with new developments that should be somehow encouraged. Long-term goal, not a requirement, because we don't want to limit development, but it's something to think about.
Okay, thank you, Lyle. Okay, other comments on the guiding principle? Sherry.
Sure. On the third bullet where it says reduced heat, can we clarify and say reduce heat island effect through landscaping, building materials, and design, just to clarify what type of heat we're talking about?
Yes, we can definitely do that. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, I'm not seeing any other hands up, so I'm going to stop sharing it for now. So, is it safe to assume that overall the drafts are headed in the right direction? Everybody accepts that they're heading in the right direction? Okay, we will be
Yeah, I
making
think so.
we'll be making these revisions, and this won't be your last opportunity to comment on these. Like I said, after the resident working groups kind of start wrapping up for right now, we will be sending out all the goals, policies, and actions to everybody for feedback, and also that's when we'll want your specific word refinements too. And then we'll be sending them out a few more times until we're really everybody's really got consensus on those. With that, I want to thank you all. Our next meeting is next Thursday. So tomorrow you'll get an email from me with your homework for that one. It's focused on water resources and conservation. So we will have, there's 6 discussion questions. And again, we'll bring over what you already put on there for water harvesting. We'll have that on the board. We'll discuss it at the next meeting, get your additional guidance. And then the meeting on May 13th will be just like this one, looking at goals, policies, and actions. So with that, I thank you all for staying 5 more minutes and hope you all have a good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye bye.